Hello and welcome to this installment of Contractors Conversation. Now, I've already posted part one, but I've gone back into the archives and I'm bringing the second installment of this powerful conversation I had with this amazing thought leader and this leadership coach, Shalanda Clark. So just enjoy this conversation. Hello and welcome to the Government Contractors Conversation Virtual Summit. And we're talking about mindset and leadership. So first of all, I want to thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Give our audience just a little bit about who you are.
All right. Hey, everybody. I am so excited to be here with you. My name is Shalanda Clark. I am a health administration officer here at the Department of Veterans Affairs. I also am an entrepreneur. I have my own business consulting company called SLC Prime Consulting Group. I'm a life coach and I'm also a mindset and business coach. We do a little bit of everything. So from business to breakthrough is my niche. And so, and I've been in this field, healthcare administration, probably about, this is my 20th year here. And I absolutely love what I do. But along those lines, I've started from entry level clerical positions to now I lead over 1,000 people in the health, in the largest administrative department in my agency. So I'm proud of that, but I'm also excited about all the challenges that we face because we get opportunities to evolve. So thank you for having me.
Wow, so you get to speak to us as a coach from the leadership and mindset perspective, but we're also going to tap into your administrative knowledge as somebody who works for the Veterans Administration. So we're going to kind of like double the impacts here. So,
all right.
But we're going to start off with leadership and mindset.
All right.
And what I wanted to, and the reason this is so important is because what I find is people, especially new entrants into government contracting, and people just starting up their company, they're transitioning from employee to employer or business owner. There's that flip of the switch that hasn't occurred yet. And it's hindering the process of the success model. And so if you can just talk a little bit around that, I like to call it that flip of the switch that needs to occur in the mindset of what it takes to truly run a business.
Right. Well, I'm glad you said that because we've been talking about what that even looks like in another group that I'm in. And one of the things we shared was people talk about the entrepreneurship, but really, do you know what business really is? And so what you find is people have a aspiration of being a business owner, but don't have the principles. What does principles of being a business owner is? Do you even think like a business owner? Do you think like an entrepreneur? Are you a visionary? Are you one who just wants to provide a service and collect a check? What are you really trying to do? And so I ask people often, what is your end goal? What would be the thing that you really want to impact? Where do you want to have your impact at? Where's your influence going to be at? What do you want to really achieve? And so when you start talking to people who are just in business, or even those who are starting out, even ones who've been in it a long time, they often don't have an idea of what they really want to do. They just know they want to make money, right? We all do. But the truth is, how you do that with ease comes with skill, and it comes with you being able to really be clear about what you really want to do. And so what you find out is that people lack clarity around who they're going to serve. They lack clarity of how they want to have impact. They lack clarity in areas of, a lot of us, because you're in business for yourself, you do a lot of different things, but really, is it beneficial for you to do a lot of different things? Would you serve better if you would focus on one area and probably fund some other things out? But oftentimes, they feel like they can't afford it, but the truth is you probably can't afford not to. And so I think people need to get their mindset around that you can't do everything and be everything. That's why it's important to do a few things in leadership, as far as building partnerships in leadership, and really truly building relationships, because I share with people often that relationships that you build in leadership will impact your bottom line. They will impact your bottom line.
Wow. You cannot afford not to.
Right, right,
I like that statement.
right, right. Because
I
you think you
like
can
that.
be an accountant, but the truth is, I learned my own. I try to be my own accountant. I am not an accountant. I had to get some help because I realized I was being audited my first year of business because I needed help in how I managed my books. So after I got an accountant in and helped me, I'm like, okay, I will never be an accountant again. I promise, because I knew I needed the expertise, just like somebody's going to call on me in my consulting business to say, hey, I need your expertise in my operations. Can you help me, remove the waste out my processes and get some results? The truth is, I had created a problem. And then I had to go hire a solution. And so the same way you want people to hire you as being their solution, you got to make sure that you have the right people on your team. And again, that goes back to leaders build and foster good relationships. If you want those relationships, that's how you establish good partnerships. Partnerships equal business and sustainability.
Now, you just said something I think people gloss over when we talk about leaderships. Leaderships build and they foster partnerships and teams. And I think sometimes people get the wrong concept of what a leadership is or what leadership is.
Right.
So I want you to kind of delve into defining the concept of leadership and what constitutes a leader.
Right. Well, a leader, just leadership alone is a partnership. It's a collective of so many different things, but some of the key things that I know for sure that you got to have is got to be able to make connections in leadership. Powerful connections are really important. And connections come with you being authentic. Being the authentic you're trying to show up as someone else. Really, the truth is that doesn't make you a house there stand out at all. You're trying to be somebody else. Nobody can be Shalanda Clark but me. I don't care how you try to sign my signature. I have DNA to prove there's only one me. And so being your authentic self and showing up in transparency and in truth and making that connection with people, a real one, not just one just to gloss all over, but one that's real and authentic and true. You want to do that. That's how you start to foster and build that relationship. One of the things I find that people lack too is communication. They don't communicate, or they give you enough, but not enough to really do what you need to do. You don't realize that your communication is a key. Your ability to communicate in leadership is a key. So I'm giving you some tools right now. Leadership has to have these components in order to be sustainable. You have to be able to connect with people. That's one. The second one would be able to communicate. Be a good communicator. And even if you're not, learn it, because it's a skill that you can't live without. And so if you're going to be a business owner, whether you are a leader in any capacity, because if you're a business owner or even a leader of your own life, even if you're not a business owner, you're just a subcontractor, you're leading your own self, you got to be able to communicate. And sometimes you have to do it more. Some people need more than enough. And I think people don't understand that when you empower people with information and communicate with them, it makes the partnership easier. That's how you lead people. You let them know what's going on. There are no surprises when you deal with me. I'm going to be a good partner with you in contracting and in networking and health administration and whatever I'm doing. You know that you know how I am. You know who you're dealing with. I've already been authentic with you. So you see how I connect with you. Like we have a good connection, because if there's no connection, then we can't communicate. And if we can't communicate, I can't hear you and you can't hear me. And so those are very critical for leaders to know, and just pillars. And it's not something that you would just apply in just contracting. It's anywhere you go. Anywhere you go, you are the brand. You are the business owner. You are the leader. You are the one who's being called on, counted on. They expecting to see the real version of you. When you call me, you get me. This is who I am all the time. And so people know that from me. And so you want to establish your brand by being able to make that connection with other people and also being able to communicate. So those are your top two right there: making a connection and being able to communicate. I would say another one would be being consistent. Oftentimes, in contracting world that you get contractors who are not consistent. And so the person on the other end is usually taking note. They're probably looking for your replacement if you can't be consistent, right? Because they're trying to figure out, they're going to get rid of you. They're trying to review the contract and see what kind of clauses they have. They're looking for something to go wrong. Oftentimes people are not as optimistic, but when you set the tone of consistency, they depend on you. They can count on you. They know you're coming. They know you're going to be present. And when other people need the service that you provide, guess what they're going to do? They're going to tell them that I know somebody. We have a great connection. He communicates very well, and he's consistent in how he delivers. And so people don't realize that when you're setting the tone for how you show up in leadership as a leader. One of the things I do for my team members is I do what I say, and they can count on me to do what I say. And if there's a situation where we have to make adjustments with what I have to deliver, I communicate with them. And because they know me enough, we've made a connection. They know how I roll. They know that I'm not just giving them something to gloss them over. I'm actually giving them truth. And so I would tell people to really lean into what you carry. Just be you. Let them see who you are. Be consistent with them and communicate what's going on. Oftentimes, when you do that, those same people that you make that connection with offer to assist. And so you're not alone. And so what you find is that's how you build your community, because in leadership, if you don't have a community, who are you leading? You have to have a community of resources. People, if you're not leading anybody, where are your partnerships? If you're not leading anybody, what kind of relationships are you really fostering? These are all key principles to leadership. So when you go back to community, that's where your resources are. Your strength is your knowledge, your education. That's where your power. It's like almost like having a battery inside of a car. Oftentimes that car doesn't start with all the pieces. You have all those pieces, but when that battery is charged, it's full, it cranks that car and it moves. And so when I think about even in leadership now, what I do in health administration and in operations, I depend on every piece of my team. I have a powerful community of players. So I know who's at the table. Do you know the players? Who's on your team? And so you can't expect to have great leadership when you don't know who's among you. Who's laboring among you? From a biblical standpoint, that's what the Bible says. But who's laboring among you? Know who's on your team. And I tell people to know your team. I presently oversee over 1,000 staff members. And one of the things that I've made it my business to do, I used to know all the names, but I do go out to the sites and do listening sessions with my people to kind of gauge what's going on. So I'm in the know. I communicate with them on a regular basis widely, so they can't say the lady just sends the email. So you want to make sure that you nurture that and foster those relationships inside of that community. Don't just build a group. When you talk to your people. And so those are things that we have to, go back to, fostering, building, nurturing. And so those are the key to that relationship in that community. And then it leads to your collaboration. And so if I go through all of those different things, that's where your collaborations are, your partnerships. That's where they are. We got to get a lot of work done. And so how can you do that without those collaborations? And all of those things are key components of leadership. No matter where you lead at, there are things that you have to foster in your leadership to help develop you, to grow you, but to grow your people and the money that you're trying to make. And so that's what I would share.
You know what? I love that you said that. And there's kind of 3 things that kind of stuck out for me. Mm-hmm. When you talked about you're always your authentic self. So when you introduce yourself and then when you engage, there's that consistency in, oh, she doesn't change. This is who she said she was. She's showing me who she is so I can believe it. But then you have a leadership style that goes along with your authentic self. So your leadership style, that's your brand.
Right.
We're kind of throwing branding in here, but we don't realize how we show up is our brand.
Right.
Even if we're just branding amongst our team, and our everyday people. That's, that is our brand. And I think a lot of people get, we always hear this term, people do business with who they know, like, and trust.
Mhm.
I think people confuse the like part with want to be friends.
Mhm.
There's a lot of people I've done business with I would not have a cup of coffee with,
Right.
but I like their business acumen.
Right.
I like their business authenticity.
Mhm.
But then I love the way you also brought in that leadership says, look, I just can't do something,
Mhm.
or I'm running into a difficulty. And, transparency moment, there was a moment where I had to tell somebody, look, my cash flow is such that I cannot at this time, but I'm gonna have to revisit it.
Right.
And then what happened was that person was like, you know what? We can work that out later.
Right.
But I couldn't do that until I was transparent and stood up in my leadership, and I gave them the opportunity to stand up in theirs. So
Right.
I just love the fact that you talked about all of that, and it all ties back into that leadership branding or that leadership style that everybody needs to develop for and identify for themselves.
Right. And it comes with being vulnerable, because of course you don't want to tell people like, I don't have the money, or I don't know how to do something. Of course you don't want to say that, but oftentimes you have to say, listen, that's something that I would love to do right now, but I may have to revisit. Being able to be vulnerable, that's power in vulnerability. Like you shared in your vulnerability, somebody, your network was so tight with you, they said, hey, that's not even an issue. I want to make sure you get this. And so I believe that when we build community like that, communities take care of one another. And I think about my community when I grew up in, my grandfather was a sharecropper, and I lived with my grandparents when I was growing up. And so he would, he would he would have fields, and people in the neighborhood would go out into the fields and help him to bring the crops in, and our community would share. They would share what they had. They would share what they knew. They would share the resources. People were able to have jobs. Money was being made. They would share along. And if he didn't have enough support, the neighborhood guys who had jobs, they would leave their jobs and go out to those fields and make sure that the harvest was good. And so I think about how they collaborated together, how they made sure that everybody had something. Nobody walked away empty-handed. And even if you didn't get something this time, that wasn't an issue. They already knew that if my turn comes, I'm going to be supported. And so I think it's really important. Two people often go in with the perception of, I got to get something from it, get something, get something, get something. But what is the big picture? What is the mission that you're trying to accomplish? Are you willing to take a step back to see the mission go forward? Or do you have to have something every single time? And so oftentimes we have great ideas in leadership, great concepts. We come up with all kinds of plans. We take the training, we do but what are you willing to give up? And so in leadership, you have to, ask how I say it, learn how to not be selfish, because oftentimes we're focused on our mission that we forget the mission. And so I would offer people to think, as a system. Um, I often can go, because my department is touches every process in our healthcare organization. We're often at the table, but people are often coming for us all the time. I'm like, my God, what's going on? But the truth is, I would rather be on the table than on the menu. But there are times where I have to give up being right, or give up my agenda to make sure the mission as a whole is accomplished. Or I may have to say, okay, I'll take on that project because I recognize the project on the end. Maybe some work here, but it's going to be greater impact. And that's the same thing with building a relationship. There's work to do to foster and connect and to communicate. That's work. But ultimately, at the end, it makes your job easier because your collaborations know, they trust you. You've already made the connections. They trust you. You communicate. You have communities with everything you need them. It makes it go easier. So it's not hard to partner with people. That's where the know, like, and trust comes from, because I know who I'm dealing with. Like you said, I may not drink coffee with you, but I know she's gonna deliver on that contract. I may not have to, I may not, like you said, I may not go to her family reunion, but I tell you what, she is consistent. She show up every week. She's here with information that we need. So people have to think about, how are you a contributor? People want to always, how I say it, and I share this often. You cannot draw what you don't extend. And so if you're going to be a leader, a powerful leader at that, one who makes change, who makes a difference, who leads people, who leads teams, who makes powerful connections, who transforms organizations and comes in and has impact, you have to be able to plant. You have to be able to have time to foster. And then there'll be a time for harvest. Of course there will be. But you have to know what you're doing and be intentional about it. Will you extend first and wait to draw? Would you do that? You have to ask yourself that.
Wow. That's just a lot to digest right there. So we're going to pause this conversation and we're going to pick it up.
Yes.
And in our next conversation, I want to talk about who we're leading. Because I think a lot of times people approach leadership as this broad blanket. But the way you lead your team and the way you lead an initiative, but then the way you lead when you're negotiating, they're not the same thing.
They're not.
So, the next time we pick up this conversation, we're going to talk about that a little bit, how leadership ebbs and flows. And you can't be so rigid in what that definition is for you. Right. So once again, I want to thank you for this part. I want to give everybody time to digest this part of the conversation.
All right. Thank you.
Sometimes we can eat so much until, our stomachs ache a little bit. I don't want everybody to walk away with an ache. I want them to be full and satisfied.
Hold on to it. Hold on to it.
So we're going to come back for dessert. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
So thank you for joining us today. And we're going to pick up on part 2 of this conversation around leadership and the. Now, that was part 1 of a 2-part conversation I had with a super, super powerful, I like to call her friend, Shalanda Clark. Now, she is an amazing, amazing leadership coach. She is an amazing, amazing mindset life coach. And there were so many nuggets in that conversation. Leadership ebbs. Leadership takes on many forms. You don't lead initiatives the same you lead teams, the same you lead projects. And a lot of times we find our leadership failing because we don't realize that our leadership needs to transform. And we don't realize that we have to elevate our leadership. Our businesses, even when we start our businesses, our leadership needs to change. Just because you are a great manager, that management skill enabled you to start your business. However, you need to transform that management skill into a business leader skill. And then that business leader skill needs to transition to an executive skill. And that executive skill needs to transition. You get where I'm going. So that was just part 1 of the conversation. We're going to come back for part 2. Just hold on. For next time, Contractors Conversation comes back. Have an amazing time. Refer this conversation to a friend, to a colleague, to a source. There's someone who needs to partake in this conversation around leadership and leadership development. I'm Luciana Turner, your host of Contractors Conversation.